At 61, Clara Whitaker stood on the porch of the house she had spent half her life paying for, and her key would not turn in the lock. She tried it once, then twice, then pressed her shoulder gently against the door as if the wood might remember her. Behind her, a red "Sold" sign leaned in the front yard beside the hydrangeas her husband had planted 27 years earlier. Her son Daniel stood at the bottom step with his hands in his coat pockets, calm as a bank teller. "Mom," he said, "don't make this harder. The sale was necessary. You couldn't manage things anymore." Clara looked down at the key in her palm. "You sold my house?" Daniel exhaled softly, like she was being difficult. "You signed the power of attorney after your surgery. I explained all of this." She had signed it in a hospital bed, with pain medicine in her blood and a nurse changing the bandage near her hip. Before we go further, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. Because this is the story of a woman everyone thought was too old, too tired, and too alone to fight back. They were wrong. The house on Briar Lane had never been fancy. 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a laundry room that froze every January, and a back step that always leaned a little to the left, no matter how many times Martin tried to fix it. But it was theirs. Clara could still remember the day they moved in with 1 borrowed couch, 3 boxes of dishes, and a mattress tied to the roof of Martin's brother's truck. Martin had sanded the kitchen table himself after Clara spilled a pot of coffee on it in 1998. The stain never fully came out, just faded into a dark oval near the corner where he used to rest his elbow. The second stair had a thin split through the middle because Daniel, at 12, had jumped down with muddy cleats after baseball practice and cracked it. Martin had patched it that same night, muttering under his breath, while Clara stood behind him trying not to laugh. Every part of the house had a memory nailed into it. The loose window in the hallway, the pencil marks inside the pantry door where they had measured Daniel every birthday until he stopped wanting them to. The little burn mark on the counter from the Christmas Clara forgot a pan of sugar cookies while Martin distracted her by dancing with her in the kitchen. And now her son stood in front of it like an agent closing a file. "I called Cedar Grove," Daniel said. "They have a room available. It's temporary until we figure out what's best." "Cedar Grove is an assisted living facility." "It's not a facility, Mom. It's a community." Clara gave a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I'm 61, Daniel. I still drive, I still cook, I still pay my own bills when someone doesn't take them out of my hands." His face tightened for half a second, then smoothed again. That was the part that hurt most. He did not yell. He did not slam doors. He used the same careful voice he used when correcting waiters or talking to lenders on the phone. "You fell in March," he said. "You forgot the insurance renewal. The property taxes were overdue. I was in the hospital, and that's exactly why I had to step in." Clara looked past him at the hydrangeas. Their blue heads had gone heavy from last night's rain, bending toward the grass like they were ashamed to be there. A silver SUV pulled into the driveway. A woman Clara had never seen stepped out holding a clipboard. Behind her, 2 men in work shirts opened the back of a van. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. "The buyers want to walk through before closing the final inspection." "The buyers are coming inside today?" "They own it now." Clara felt the words land somewhere deep and cold. They own it now. She had folded laundry in that living room. She had held Martin's hand in that bedroom during the last weeks of his cancer.
counting the seconds between his breaths because she was afraid one would not be followed by another.
She had made soup for Daniel after his first heartbreak and paid his community college tuition with money she saved from cleaning offices at night. Now Daniel stepped onto the porch and held out an envelope. "What is this?" "Cash. $94. It's what was left after I covered the immediate expenses." $94, Clara repeated. "And the address for Cedar Grove." He hesitated, then pulled another folded paper from inside his coat. "Also, this. I found it in Dad's old file cabinet. It's the deed to your father's cabin out near Alder Creek." Clara stared at the paper. "My father's cabin?" Daniel gave a tired little smile. "You always said you wanted to see it again. It's abandoned, Mom. Probably worthless, but technically it's yours, and I thought maybe having the document would help you feel like you still had something." Still had something. As if he had not just taken the door behind her, the porch under her feet, the roof Martin had patched in the summer heat with his shirt stuck to his back. Clara took the envelope. Then she took the deed. Daniel reached for her suitcase, the brown one sitting beside the porch rail. "I'll drive you to Cedar Grove." "No." He stopped. "Mom, I said no. You don't have anywhere else to go." Clara slipped Martin's wedding ring from the chain around her neck and closed it inside her fist. She had started wearing it there after the funeral because her own hands had swollen too much for both rings. The metal was warm from her skin. Daniel looked embarrassed now, not guilty. Embarrassed, like she was making a scene in front of the new owners. Clara stepped down from the porch slowly, one hand on the railing Martin had built after her knee surgery. She picked up her suitcase herself. "Where are you going?" She looked at the sold sign, at the hydrangeas, at the house that no longer wanted her key. "To see what my father left me." The bus station was 6 blocks away. Clara walked there with the envelope in her purse, the deed folded inside her Bible, and Martin's ring pressed so tightly in her palm it left a mark. When the clerk asked for her destination, she said Alder Creek before she could change her mind. As the bus pulled away from Briar Lane, Clara did not look back. If her father had left her that cabin, then maybe he had not left her a ruin. Maybe he had left her a reason. The bus dropped Clara at Alder Creek at 6:42, though calling it a bus stop felt generous. It was a wooden bench beside a closed bait shop with a cracked plastic schedule nailed to a post and weeds growing through the gravel. The driver lowered her suitcase to the ground, nodded once, and pulled away before she had fully turned around. For a moment, Clara stood there in the evening light, with her coat buttoned wrong and her purse tucked under one arm. Alder Creek was smaller than she remembered. One road, a diner with a flickering sign, a feed store already locked for the night, a church steeple behind a line of dark pines. The air smelled of damp leaves and wood smoke, and somewhere far off a dog barked twice, then went quiet. She took the deed from her Bible and read the address again. Hayes Cabin, County Road 18, North Ridge Parcel. The woman at the diner gave her directions without asking too many questions. "1.5 miles past the creek bridge," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Old place sits back from the road. You'll see the mailbox if the ditch hasn't swallowed it." The ditch had nearly swallowed it. Clara found the mailbox just as the last color was leaving the sky. It lay on its side in the grass, dented, one red flag bent straight down like a broken finger. The name Hayes was still visible in flaked white paint, though vines had crawled over half the post. Beyond it, A narrow dirt drive disappeared between pine trees and blackberry thorns. She pulled her suitcase behind her until the wheels caught in mud. Then she carried it. The cabin appeared slowly, not as a home, but as a shape the forest had almost taken back. The porch sagged in the middle. 2 front windows were cloudy with grime, and one had a crack running from corner to corner. Wild grapevine climbed the left wall and reached over the roof, gripping the shingles like a hand. The front steps had sunk on one side, making the whole entrance tilt. Clara remembered a place where her father used to sit with coffee at sunrise, boots on the rail, calling her little bird, even after she was grown. This was not that place. Or maybe it was, after the world had finished with it. The key from the envelope did not fit the first lock. It barely fit the second. She had to lift the door by the knob and push with her hip before it opened with a wooden groan that seemed too loud in the trees. The smell came first. Dust, old mouse droppings, cold ashes, damp wool. Clara stood in the doorway and let her eyes adjust. The cabin was 1 room downstairs, with a stone fireplace on the far wall and a black iron stove near the kitchen corner. A narrow bed sat under the back window with a mattress sunk in the middle and stained along one edge. A table leaned slightly on uneven legs. There were shelves, mostly empty except for a chipped mug, a rusted lantern, and 3 jars with nothing inside but dust. And by the door, hanging from a wooden peg, was her father's coat. Clara stopped breathing for a second. It was the brown canvas one he had worn every winter, the one with a burn mark near the cuff from when he reached too close to a stovepipe. She touched the sleeve with 2 fingers. The fabric was stiff, colder than the room, but for one foolish moment she expected to smell tobacco and pine sap and the peppermint candies he kept in his pocket. Instead, there was only dust. She tried the light switch. Nothing. She found a pump outside near the back corner and worked the handle until her shoulder ached. At first it gave only a hollow cough. Then a violent spit of rusty water splashed over the basin and onto her shoes. She let it run until the stream thinned from brown to pale orange, filled an old tin pot she found inside, and told herself boiled water was still water. Her phone showed 1 bar, then none, then 1 again. She tried Daniel once. She did not know why. Habit, maybe, or weakness. The call failed before it rang. "Good," she whispered, though it did not feel good. By the time darkness settled, Clara had made a place to sleep. She dragged the mattress off the bed after seeing the black spots near the seam and laid 2 old quilts over the wooden frame instead. Her knees had swollen from the walk, and every time she bent down, pain pulsed behind her right kneecap. She ate dinner from her purse, 4 stale crackers wrapped in a napkin from the bus station, and half a peppermint she had found at the bottom of the pocket beside Martin's ring. The cabin cooled fast. Wind slipped through the cracked front window with a thin whistle. A loose board somewhere outside tapped again and again against the wall. Clara sat on the edge of the bed frame with her coat still on, hands tucked beneath her arms, watching moonlight spread across the floor. That was when she noticed it. Near the pantry, where the shelves met the back wall, 3 floorboards were darker than the rest. Not just stained, different wood. Narrower, too. The lines between them were too straight, too clean beneath the dirt. Clara stared at them for a long time. Then the wind hit the window harder, and she looked away. "No," she said to the room. "Not tonight." She slept badly, if it could be called sleep. She woke every hour to some new sound,
Mice in the wall, branches scraping the roof, the stove cooling with soft metallic clicks. Just before dawn, she dreamed she was back on Briar Lane, standing on the porch while Daniel changed the lock from the inside. When she opened her eyes, the cabin was gray with morning. Her hands were stiff.
Her knees throbbed. For a few seconds she did not remember where she was, and that was almost a mercy. Then she saw the coat on the peg. Clara got up. She needed tools, something to board the broken window, something to scrape the stovepipe, something to make the pump stop coughing rust into every pot. She searched under the bed, behind the stove, inside a low cabinet whose door hung crooked on one hinge. Behind the stove, wrapped in burlap and coated with ash, she found her father's old pry bar. The sight of it made her throat tighten. Arthur Hayes had painted the handle red so he could find it in tall grass. Most of the paint was gone now, worn down by his hands, but one red stripe remained near the end. Clara carried it to the pantry. For 5 full minutes she stood over the darker boards and did nothing. Her father had never mentioned a cellar. Never. Not when she was 8 and asking what every locked drawer was for. Not when she was 17 and angry enough to accuse him of loving secrets more than people. Not even on the last phone call before he died, when his voice had been so thin she could barely hear it. She wedged the pry bar into the seam. The first board resisted. The second gave with a dry crack. The third lifted enough for cold air to breathe up from beneath the floor. Clara stepped back. Under the boards was a narrow hatch, iron-ringed, set flush into the floor. She hooked the pry bar through the ring and pulled. The hatch rose slowly, shedding dirt from its edges, and a smell of stone and old earth moved into the room. Below it, steps descended into darkness. On the lowest visible step, catching the morning light, lay a small metal tag tied with blackened wire. Clara leaned down and read the stamped words. A. Hayes. Do not burn. Do not sell. Clara did not go down right away. She stood over the open hatch with the pry bar in one hand and her father's warning tag lying on the bottom step like it had been waiting for her to learn how to read it properly. Do not burn. Do not sell. Not do not open. Not stay out. Not danger. Her father had been careful with words. Arthur Hayes could go 3 days saying almost nothing. But when he did speak, he meant exactly what he said. She took the lantern from the shelf, shook it, and heard a little fuel move inside. The wick was dry at the top, but when she turned the knob, it rose. She found matches in a rusted tin near the stove and struck one against the box. The flame caught with a weak blue flicker, then yellow. The lantern glass smoked, cleared, and threw a trembling circle of light down the stone steps. The air below was colder. Clara went 1 step at a time, keeping one hand on the wall. The stones were damp but solid, fitted tight in a way that made her think her father had either built this place himself or paid someone who knew what secrets weighed. At the bottom, her shoes touched packed earth. The cellar was larger than she expected. Long and narrow, running beneath the pantry and part of the kitchen, with shelves built along both walls. Not a treasure room, not a box of cash, not the sort of miracle a desperate woman might foolishly hope for after losing everything in one day. But it was not empty. Glass jars lined the shelves, some filled with dried seeds, others with curled paper labels turned brown at the edges. Bundles wrapped in oilcloth sat beside canvas pouches tied with twine. There were envelopes marked by year, small knives with curved blades, a handsaw with teeth fine as a comb,
and a wooden case that held grafting tools laid in velvet grooves. On the far wall hung maps, rolled and tied, each one brittle from age but carefully protected from damp. And on the table in the center were notebooks, 6 of them, thick, black-covered, the corners softened from use.
Clara touched the first one the way she had touched his coat upstairs, cautiously, almost apologetically. Her father's handwriting covered the front page in dark ink. March 3rd, 1979. North Slope. Buds swell early. Hard frost likely. Protect lower limbs if temperature drops below 26. She turned the page. April 18, 1980. Bloom heavy on rows 3 and 7. Bees late. Hand-pollinated 2 branches. Alder gold still lives. Clara frowned. She turned another page. October 9, 1983. Small yield. Fruit ugly but sound. Yellow skin, red flesh near core. Sugar high. Alder gold still lives. The phrase appeared again and again, sometimes written at the bottom of a page, sometimes underlined twice, once circled so hard the pen had nearly torn through. Alder gold still lives. Clara did not know what it meant. Not yet. She opened an oilcloth bundle and found photographs. Most were of trees, branches tied with strips of fabric, rows of trunks in winter, blossoms marked by small paper tags. Then she found one that made her sit down on the cellar step. Her father stood in an orchard, younger than she had remembered him being, wearing the same brown canvas coat that now hung upstairs by the door. Beside him was a little girl with crooked bangs, holding an apple in both hands like it was something fragile. Clara. She could not have been more than 8. Behind them the trees were full and low-branched, heavy with small yellow apples. On the back of the photograph, Arthur had written, "Clara's first alder gold, 1973. The memory came back so sharply it felt less like remembering and more like being struck. She was little again, standing in wet grass with her shoes untied. Her father had twisted an apple from a branch and polished it on his sleeve before handing it to her. It was small, lopsided, yellow with a blush near the bottom. She had complained that it was ugly. Arthur had laughed, not loudly, just enough to shake his shoulders. "Best things usually are," he had said. She had bitten into it and stopped. The inside was not white. It had red running through it near the core, like sunset trapped in fruit. Sweet first, then sharp, then something almost like honey and cider together. Her father had crouched in front of her. "Remember that taste, little bird. One day people will forget it existed." Clara sat in the cellar holding the photograph until the lantern hissed low. She was still there when a truck pulled up outside. The sound made her freeze. Tires on gravel. A door opening. Footsteps on the porch, slow but sure. "Hello?" a woman called. "Anybody alive in there? Or did this place finally eat somebody?" Clara climbed out of the cellar with the photograph in her pocket and the lantern in her hand. The woman on the porch was short, broad-shouldered, and about Clara's age or a little older, with silver hair cut close to her head and a face that looked like it had never had much patience for nonsense. She held a blue water jug in one hand and a paper sack in the other. "Mabel Rowe," she said. "I run the general store. Saw smoke from the stovepipe this morning
and figured either Arthur's ghost learned to cook or somebody finally came back. Clara stared at her. "I'm Clara. Arthur was my father." Mabel's expression changed, but only slightly. Less suspicion, more recognition. "I thought you might be. You've got his eyes. Tired, but stubborn." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation and set the water jug on the table. "Pump'll run rusty for a while. Let it clear before you drink. And there's biscuits in the sack. Don't get excited. They're yesterday's." "Thank you," Clara said. Mabel looked around the cabin, then at the open pantry boards. Her mouth tightened. "You found his cellar." "You knew about it?" "I knew there was something under here. Arthur didn't let people ask twice." "What was alder gold?" Mabel went quiet. Outside, wind moved through the trees. Inside, the cabin seemed to wait with them.
"Not what?" Mabel said finally. "Apples. At least, that's what folks used to say. There was an orchard behind this cabin once. Your father guarded it like it was Fort Knox. Wouldn't let kids cut through it. Wouldn't let hunters camp near it. Wouldn't let a logging man touch one branch. People laughed at him, said he was protecting dead trees." "Are they dead?" Mabel looked toward the back window. "Why don't you go see?" The path behind the cabin was almost gone. Clara pushed through blackberry canes, wild grapevine, and waist-high weeds that clung to her skirt and scratched her wrists. Mabel stayed near the porch, letting her go alone. At first, Clara saw only brush. Then shapes appeared inside it. Trunks. Old apple trees, bent and dark, half swallowed by vines, but still standing. Some leaned badly, some had split limbs. Some were hollow in places where weather and insects had chewed through. But near the ends of the branches, leaves still moved in the wind. Green leaves, living leaves. Clara walked deeper. There were dozens. The orchard had not died. It had been buried. Near the far edge, where the ground sloped toward the creek, one tree still held fruit. Not much. 5 apples, maybe 6, hanging small and stubborn from a twisted branch. Clara reached up and took one carefully. It was ugly. Smaller than grocery store apples, uneven, its yellow skin freckled brown. But when she turned it in her hand, she saw the faint red veins beneath the skin near the blossom end. Her breath caught. She bit into it. For a second, there was only the crisp break of fruit. Then sweetness. Then sharpness. Then honey and cider and autumn grass, the taste of an 8-year-old girl standing beside her father while he tried to save something the world had already decided to forget. Clara lowered the apple and looked at the trees. This was not a cabin. This was not a ruin. This was what her father had spent his life protecting. Clara did not restore the orchard in some grand burst of strength. There was no miracle morning where the vines fell away and the cabin became beautiful. The work came in inches. The first day, she cleared one path from the back door to the nearest tree, and had to sit down twice because her knee burned so badly she could feel her pulse in it. The second day, she dragged 3 armloads of dead grapevine to the edge of the clearing and found a yellow jacket nest under a fallen branch. The third day, rain came through 2 places in the roof, and Clara spent the afternoon moving pots and coffee cans across the floor, listening to water strike metal every few seconds. At night, she read her father's notebooks by lantern light. Arthur had recorded everything. Frost dates, bloom times, which branches had produced fruit, which trees had nearly died after the hard winter of 1994. There were sketches of grafts, maps of rows that no longer looked like rows, and little notes in the margins that sounded so much like him she sometimes had to close the book. Tree 7 still fighting. Leave it be. Tree 12 looks dead. It is not. People mistake quiet things for finished things. On the 6th morning, Mabel brought someone with her. He was tall, thin, and bent slightly at the shoulders, wearing coveralls and a cap that said Keller Auto Repair, though the stitching had faded almost white. "This is Sam Keller," Mabel said. "Used to fix every truck in 3 counties before his hands got too stiff for engine work." Sam looked at the pump, then at Clara. "Mabel says you've been drinking rust." "I boil it first." "That doesn't make it less rust." He worked for 2 hours without saying much, took the pump handle apart, cleaned the valve, replaced a cracked leather seal with one he cut from an old belt in his toolbox. Clara held the flashlight while he cursed under his breath. When he finished, the water came out brown for a minute, then cloudy, then clear enough to see the bottom of the bucket. "How much do I owe you?" Clara asked. Sam wiped his hands on a rag. "Arthur fixed my mother's furnace in 1988 and wouldn't take a dime. We'll call this interest." By the end of the 2nd week, Clara had gathered enough apples for 1 small batch of filling. They were bruised, spotted, and ugly, but when she peeled them, the flesh near the core blushed pink. She used flour Mabel had given her, lard from the store, sugar she bought with the last of Daniel's $94, and a chipped enamel bowl from the cabin shelf. The hand pies came out uneven. Some leaked at the edges. One burned on the bottom. But the smell filled the cabin like something waking up. Mabel took 6 to the general store. "Don't expect much," she said. "People here buy what they know." By noon, all 6 were gone. By 4, 3 people had come back asking if there were more. The first ones bought out of pity. Clara knew that. They saw the widow from the old Hayes place, living in a cabin with no proper roof, and they paid $2 because it made them feel decent. But the second time, they came back differently. A young mother bought 2 and ate one in the parking lot before driving away. A man from the feed mill said it tasted like something his grandmother used to make, and stood there blinking too much after he said it. Mabel posted a picture on the Alder Creek community page. Found something special at the old Hayes place. Clara Whitaker's alder apple hand pies. Don't ask me what's in them. She won't tell, and I don't think she knows either. The post was shared 14 times. A week later, a white Subaru climbed the cabin road and stopped beside the fallen mailbox. A woman in her 50s stepped out wearing field boots, khaki pants, and glasses on a cord around her neck. She carried a canvas bag and looked at the orchard before she looked at the cabin. "Clara Whitaker?" she asked. "I'm Dr. Helen Morris, State University Horticulture Department. Mabel sent me photos of the fruit." Clara nearly laughed. "Mabel sends a lot of things before asking." "Good. Otherwise I wouldn't be here." Helen did not rush. She tasted a slice of apple, examined the skin, the red veining, the leaves, the bark, the old graft scars. Then Clara brought out Arthur's maps. That was when Helen stopped smiling. "Where did he get these?" "My father drew them." "These row notes go back decades." "Longer than that, maybe." Helen turned one page, then another. "Mrs. Whitaker, I don't want to overstate this before testing, but this may be a lost regional variety from the late 1800s. There were references to an alder gold in nursery catalogs, but it was believed extinct." Extinct. The words sat in the cabin like a match near dry paper. Helen asked permission to take leaf samples, 2 apples, and photographs of the graft unions. Clara agreed,
But when a nursery owner from Asheville called 2 days later offering an early contract for grafting rights, she did not sign. The paper was polite. The number was larger than anything she had seen in years. Still, Clara placed the pen down. One signature had already cost her a home. She would not lose her father's orchard the same way. On Friday morning, the Alder Creek Gazette ran a small story on page 3. Widow restoring lost apple orchard at Hayes Cabin. There was a photograph of Clara standing beside tree 7, one hand on the trunk, hair pinned badly, sleeves rolled to her elbows. That evening, her phone rang. Daniel. For a moment, she let it buzz in her hand. Then she answered. He did not ask where she was sleeping. He did not ask if she had enough food. He did not ask if the cabin had heat. He only said, "Mom, what exactly did you find out there?" Daniel arrived Saturday morning in a dark sedan that looked too clean for the cabin road.
He parked beside the fallen mailbox and sat there for a moment with the engine running, as if giving Clara time to understand that the outside world had found her again. Melissa got out first. She wore cream-colored pants, low boots, and a coat that had no business near mud. Her hair was tucked behind one ear, her phone already in her hand. Daniel stepped out carrying a leather folder, the same one he used for bank meetings and insurance appointments, and every conversation where he wanted people to know he had come prepared. Clara watched them from the porch with a paring knife in her hand. She had been peeling apples for another batch of pies. Flour dust clung to one sleeve. Her hair had come loose at the back, and there was a smear of ash on her wrist from cleaning the stove that morning. Daniel looked at her and gave a careful smile. "Mom, you look tired." "Good morning to you, too." Melissa glanced at the porch boards before putting her foot on the first step. "Daniel, this is worse than the pictures." Clara looked at her. "What pictures?" Daniel's smile thinned. "The ones in the newspaper. That's partly why we came." "We?" "We're concerned." That word did something to Clara. Concerned. It was the word people used when they wanted control to sound like kindness. Daniel climbed the steps slowly, testing each board like he was entering a condemned building. Melissa followed, lifting her pants slightly to avoid touching the dust on the threshold. Inside, the cabin smelled of apples, wood smoke, and damp stone. The leaks had been caught in buckets. The broken window was covered with cardboard and 2 strips of tape. Clara had scrubbed the table clean, stacked Arthur's notebooks near the pantry, and laid the oldest map flat beneath 2 jars to keep it from curling. Daniel's eyes went straight to the notebooks. "So these are what the university woman came to see." "Some of them." "And the trees?" "Yes." He nodded as if she had confirmed a number in a ledger. "Mom, this is exactly what I was worried about. You're alone out here. Strangers are coming onto the property. People are talking about contracts and rare apples and whatever else. You don't know who's trying to take advantage of you." Clara set the paring knife on the table. "That's funny coming from you." Melissa's head turned sharply. Daniel looked wounded. Not angry yet, wounded, because that worked better. "I'm trying to protect you." "You sold my house." "I handled an asset you were no longer able to manage." "My house, Daniel." He opened the leather folder. "And now you're living in a structure with exposed wiring, no proper heating, no confirmed water safety, and stairs that probably wouldn't pass inspection in a shed." Melissa had moved toward the kitchen corner. Clara heard the tiny click of a phone camera. "Are you taking pictures?" Melissa lowered the phone too late.
We need to document the condition, for your safety. Clara stood very still. Melissa photographed the cracked sink, the bucket under the roof leak, the taped window, the wire running from the old outlet near the stove. Then she stepped outside and took pictures of the sagging porch, the rusted pump, the path into the orchard. Not once did she photograph the cleared rows, the stacked brush, the repaired pump handle, the jars of pie filling cooling on the shelf, or the clean quilt Clara had hung over the bed. Daniel touched the top notebook. I'm going to take these home for safekeeping. Clara crossed the room before he could lift it. No! He blinked. Mom? No! They're old. They could be damaged here. They survived 40 years before you cared they existed. His face changed then. The softness left it. For the first time since he arrived, Clara saw not the son who had once cried because he scraped his knee on the driveway, but the man who had stood on her porch and told her the buyers owned her life now. You need to be very careful, he said quietly.
With my father's notebooks. With all of this. The contracts, the publicity, the way you're making decisions right now.
I haven't signed anything.
That's not the point. You're under emotional stress. You just lost your home.
Clara gave a small, dry laugh. I wonder how that happened. Daniel closed the folder. The power of attorney is still active. No, it isn't. I mailed the revocation on Monday. Certified. For the first time, he looked genuinely surprised. Melissa stopped taking pictures. Daniel recovered quickly, but not completely. That doesn't mean a court won't listen if the family believes you're putting yourself at risk. The family? Yes, your family. Clara looked from him to Melissa, then back to him. You mean you? He slipped the notebooks back into place, but his fingers rested on them 1 second too long. We'll talk soon, he said. After they left, Clara stood in the doorway until the sedan disappeared down the road. Then she locked the cabin for the first time since arriving. She did not cry. She went to the cellar. In the wooden lockbox beneath Arthur's maps, under seed envelopes and old tax receipts, she found a packet wrapped in wax paper. Legal documents. Not one page, many. The first words were enough to make her sit down. Hayes Family Irrevocable Land Trust. Arthur had placed the cabin, the orchard, the water rights, and all plant material records and cultivars developed or maintained on the property into a trust 12 years before his death. Clara Ann Hayes Whitaker was named the sole beneficiary. Not Martin, not Daniel, not any future spouse, creditor, buyer, or relative acting under ordinary power of attorney. Her father had not trusted easily. Now she understood why. The next morning, Clara took the documents to a small white house behind the courthouse in Alder Creek. The brass plate by the door read, Louise Benton, attorney at law, retired.
Louise was 80 if she was a day, with sharp eyes and hands steady enough to turn every page without rushing. She read in silence while Clara sat across from her, holding Martin's ring in her fist. Finally, Louise removed her glasses. "I knew your father," she said. "He saved my farm in 1991 when the bank was ready to take it." Clara swallowed. "Can Daniel get the orchard?" Louise tapped the trust papers once with her finger. "No, honey. Your father didn't leave you a cabin." She looked Clara in the eye. "He left you a shield." The petition arrived on a Thursday morning in a white envelope Clara almost mistook for a tax notice. She had been outside with Sam, holding a ladder steady while he patched the worst leak above the kitchen corner. Mabel's truck was parked near the pump, the tailgate down, 2 sacks of flour and a crate of empty jars sitting in the bed. It was an ordinary morning by then, which meant there was work. And work had become the thing that kept Clara from thinking too long about what had been taken. The envelope was taped to the cabin door. Clara opened it at the kitchen table while rainwater dripped into one last bucket near the stove. Petition for emergency conservatorship. Her name appeared 3 times on the first page. Daniel's appeared once. Petitioner: Daniel Whitaker, adult son. By the second page, her hands had gone cold. He had written that she was a recently displaced widow living in unsafe conditions on an abandoned rural property. He had written that she was engaging with unknown third parties regarding unverified agricultural assets. He had written that she had refused family assistance, revoked a power of attorney under possible outside influence, and was at risk of financial exploitation. Outside influence. That was what he called Mabel bringing water, Sam fixing the pump, Dr. Morris testing leaves, Louise reading the papers Arthur had left behind. He made it sound clean, responsible. Like he was not the man who had sold her home and handed her $94 on the porch. Louise did not look surprised when Clara brought the petition to her office. "Men like your son rarely stop at one locked door," she said, turning the pages. "They try another." The hearing was set for the following Monday. Clara spent the next 4 days doing exactly what Louise told her to do. Not worrying out loud, not calling Daniel, not answering Melissa's messages, which came twice and sounded almost kind if you did not read them carefully. "We just want what's best. Please don't let strangers fill your head. Daniel is under so much stress because he loves you." Clara deleted none of them. Louise said to keep everything. On Monday morning, Clara walked into the Goshen County Courthouse wearing her navy dress, the one she had last worn to Martin's memorial service. Mabel had pressed it for her. Sam had driven them both. Louise walked beside Clara with a leather briefcase and a cane she did not need, but used because, as she said, "Judges underestimate old women until old women start talking." Daniel sat near the front with Melissa and an attorney in a gray suit. He stood when he saw Clara. For 1 second he looked like a son, nervous, tired, almost sorry. Then his attorney touched his elbow and the expression vanished. The judge was a woman named Harriet Sloan. She read the petition without changing her face. Daniel's attorney spoke first. He described Clara as vulnerable, isolated, recently homeless, living in a cabin without reliable utilities. He showed photographs Melissa had taken: the cracked sink, the taped window, the sagging porch, the bucket under the leak. He did not show the cleared orchard rows. He did not show the repaired pump. He did not show the jars labeled and stacked, the receipts, the clean bedding, the temporary roof patch, or the new lock on the door. "Mr. Whitaker has already had to step in once," the attorney said, "when Mrs. Whitaker became unable to manage her primary residence. He is now attempting to prevent further harm." Clara kept her eyes on the judge. Louise rose slowly when it was her turn. "Your Honor, Mrs. Whitaker is not here with feelings. She is here with records." She placed the first folder on the table. A medical evaluation from Dr. Patel dated 3 days earlier. Clear cognitive function, no signs of impairment, capable of independent decision-making. The second folder, certified revocation of power of attorney, mailed and received before Daniel's petition.
The third, the deed to the Hayes cabin and the Hayes family irrevocable land trust. Louise read the relevant clause aloud. Cabin, orchard, water rights, and all plant material, records, and cultivars developed or maintained on the property, sole beneficiary, Clara Ann Hayes Whitaker. Daniel shifted in his chair. Louise placed down more documents. Paid property tax receipt, repair invoices, Sam's written statement on the pump and roof, Dr. Morris's university letter stating the orchard might contain a historically significant apple variety and recommending preservation. A nursery's written offer, unsigned, proving Clara had not entered a binding contract. Then Mabel's ledger from the general store. 12 pies sold the first week, 26 the second, 41 the third. Every dollar recorded. Every bag of flour and sugar paid back. Mrs. Whitaker is not dissipating assets, Louise said. She is creating income from property that her father legally protected for her. She is refusing to sign contracts without counsel. That is not incompetence. That is wisdom. Daniel's attorney tried to object, but Judge Sloan raised a hand. "I want to hear about the house," she said. The courtroom went quiet. Louise opened a thinner folder. Briar Lane had been sold 6 days after Daniel listed it. The sale price was $48,000 below the lowest market estimate. The buyer was a limited liability company formed the previous month.
One of its registered managers was a man named Evan Price. Louise turned one page. Evan Price was Daniel's business partner in 2 prior real estate transactions. Daniel stared at the table. Clara felt something inside her go still. Louise did not raise her voice. Of the proceeds from that sale, only $94 in cash were provided to Mrs. Whitaker. We have bank records showing transfers from the closing account into an account controlled by Mr. Whitaker. We are not asking the court to decide that issue fully today. We are asking the court not to reward the person who created the emergency by giving him control over the person he displaced. Daniel finally looked at Clara, not with love, not with shame, with fear. Judge Sloan removed her glasses and set them on the bench. "I am denying the petition for emergency conservatorship," she said. "Mrs. Whitaker has demonstrated capacity, documented ownership interests, responsible financial conduct, and appropriate legal counsel." Daniel closed his eyes. The judge continued. "The court will also order that proceeds from the sale of the Briar Lane property currently under Mr. Whitaker's control be frozen pending a full accounting. Further, this court recognizes that the Hayes Trust property is not subject to Mr. Whitaker's authority under the prior power of attorney or this petition." The gavel came down once. Not loud, but final. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like wet pavement and cut grass. Mabel hugged Clara hard enough to hurt her ribs. Sam shook Louise's hand and said he'd never seen a woman skin a man with paperwork so cleanly. Clara stood on the courthouse steps with the folder against her chest. She was not rich. The cabin still needed a roof. The orchard still needed pruning. Her home on Briar Lane was still gone. But Daniel could not touch the cabin. He could not take the notebooks. He could not hold her keys. For the first time in a long time, Clara Whitaker belonged to herself again. By 7:10 on Saturday morning, Clara had flour on both hands, apple skins in a blue enamel bowl, and Mabel Rose standing on the porch arguing with a folding table. "This thing has 1 good leg and 3 opinions," Mabel muttered, kicking the metal brace until it snapped into place. Clara looked up from the pie dough.
That table came from your store." "Exactly. I know its character." The cabin did not look new. Nothing about it looked polished enough to be mistaken for money. But it looked alive now. Sam had rebuilt the worst part of the porch with cedar boards that still smelled sharp in the cool morning air. A strip of fresh gravel curved beside the driveway where cars could pull in without sinking into mud. The broken front window had been replaced with used glass from the church basement. On the porch rail, Mabel had tied a piece of yellow cloth beneath a hand-painted sign. Alder Gold Harvest Day. Below it, smaller letters read, "Pies, preserves, saplings, coffee." By 8, the first jars were on the table. Apple butter, spiced slices, 2 dozen hand pies cooling under clean dish towels. Beside them stood 12 young grafted saplings in black nursery pots, each one tagged in Clara's handwriting. Alder Gold, Hayes Orchard Line. Dr. Helen Morris arrived just after 9 with a folder under one arm and a smile she was trying not to show too soon. "You're making that face," Clara said. "What face?" "The face people make when they already know something and want to be dramatic." Helen laughed and handed her the folder. "Then I'll skip the drama. The genetic testing came back. It's not a commercial sport. It's not a renamed Golden Delicious. It is distinct." Clara looked down at the papers, but the words blurred for a second. Helen touched the top page. "It matches descriptions of alder gold from 19th century regional nursery records, but there are no known living accession samples in the databases we checked."
Clara, your father preserved something people thought was gone." Mabel stopped arranging jars. Sam, who had been tightening a screw on the sign, lowered his screwdriver. Helen continued gently. "The nursery contract is real, not charity, not a one-time check. If you allow controlled grafting rights, this could support you for years, maybe longer depending on demand." Clara looked past the porch to the old trees. Their limbs had been cleaned of the worst vines. Sunlight reached the trunks now. For the first time, she could see the shape of the orchard her father had seen all along. Cars began arriving before she had a chance to answer. People came from Alder Creek, then from 2 towns over. Some bought pies. Some walked the orchard rows with paper cups of coffee. A little girl held one of the ugly yellow apples in both hands and asked why it had red inside. Clara told her some things kept their best color hidden until you opened them. Near noon, a dark sedan pulled into the gravel strip. Clara knew it before the door opened. Daniel got out alone. He looked thinner than he had in court. His shirt was wrinkled under his jacket, and the careful shine had gone out of his face. But his eyes still moved quickly, counting cars, tables, jars, saplings, people. Even broken, Daniel was still measuring. Mabel stepped closer to Clara. "Want me to send him off?" "No," Clara said. "Not yet." Daniel stopped at the edge of the porch. "Mom." "Daniel?" He looked at the pies, then at the sign, then at the orchard behind her. "You've done a lot." "I had help." "I can see that." He rubbed both hands over his face, and for a moment, Clara saw the boy who used to come into the kitchen after school and ask if there was anything to eat before he even took off his backpack. "I need to talk to you," he said, "as family." Clara did not invite him inside. She stepped down from the porch and walked with him to the side of the cabin, where the noise from the tables softened but never disappeared. Daniel looked toward the cellar window. "I made mistakes." "Yes." "I panicked. There were debts, more than Melissa knew.
More than I knew how to handle. The house sale was supposed to buy time. My house was not yours to use for time. He swallowed. I know that now. Clara waited. He kept going because silence had always made him uncomfortable. The court accounting is going to ruin me if we don't work something out. I'm not asking you to forget everything. I'm asking you to let me help fix this without lawyers tearing the family apart. The family was not torn apart by lawyers. His mouth tightened, but he nodded. Then came the part she had expected. I could help here, he said. With storage, contracts, managing inventory. I know business. You're going to need systems, access, maybe a spare key just so I can... No! He stopped. Clara's voice stayed calm. No one holds my keys anymore. Daniel looked at the cabin door, then at her. You don't trust me at all. I trust what you already showed me. The answer hurt him. She saw that it did. But hurt was not the same as change. I'm not going to humiliate you, Clara said. I'm not going to stand in court and ask for more than what was taken. Louise will accept a court-supervised repayment plan if the numbers are honest. You can repay what belongs to me, and someday, if you come here as my son and not as my manager, I may open the door. His eyes reddened. For 1 second, Clara thought he might apologize properly, without explanation folded inside it. Instead, he nodded once. I don't know how to do that, he said. I know. Daniel left with no pie, no money, no papers, and no key. That evening, after the last car pulled away and Mabel took the cash box to count at the table, Clara went down into the cellar alone. She opened Arthur's final notebook, the one she had saved because she had not been ready for the last page. The handwriting near the end was shaky, but still his.
If Clara ever comes back here, don't let her think she is starting over. She is continuing. Clara pressed her fingers to the page. The next morning, Sam helped her hang a new sign by the road. Fresh white board, black letters, yellow apple painted in the corner. Hayes and Whitaker Orchard. Alder Gold lives here. Clara stood beneath it with Martin's ring on the chain at her neck, her father's notebook under one arm, and the cabin behind her no longer looking like a place someone had been forced to go. It looked like a place someone had finally returned to. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. And tell us honestly, if you were Clara, could you ever forgive Daniel? Or would you leave that door closed for good?